Hey guys and girls, welcome back. In this session, we're finally going to be learning some basic operations in Tableau to get you acquainted with its interface. There's three main steps in Tableau that are involved in creating any data analysis report. And those three steps are connecting to a data source, choosing dimensions and measures, and finally applying our visualization technique. In this session, we're going to be opening Tableau for the first time and taking a look at what it takes to connect to a data source. Now it's pretty straightforward, but it's great if you follow along and do this at your own pace. And if you feel like I may be moving too fast, go ahead and pause the video while you catch up. And what we're going to be doing in this session is we're going to be locating the data that we're going to use in our visualization and use an appropriate type of connection to read that data and what we call ingest into Tableau. So let's go ahead and open up in Tableau Public, which we have just installed and have it running on our machines. And the very first screen, let's make this big here. The very first screen we're going to take a look at here is what we call the connection pane. And there's three actual different panes here. The first of which is the connection pane, where we are going to be connecting to a file that we'll be ingesting into our Tableau report. So this is the step where we go ahead and connect to our data source. So as we know, we're going to be working with a text data source in this session and in these video lectures, mainly because Tableau Public allows for this type of data. Other types of data connections, such as server data sources and cloud data sources, are things you'll find in Tableau's desktop version, and they're unfortunately not available with Tableau Public, but it's not an issue because in reality it's just another data source. So if you know how to connect to the data source we have here, it's very simple to do the same exact thing for server, so it shouldn't make a difference. So let's go ahead and connect to our very first data source, shall we? So we're going to be using a CSV file, and what we are looking for is a text file. Remember, CSV always comes in as a text file. It's a comment delimited value, right? So we are going to be bringing in a text file. We can see that New York room rental listings is the file we're going to be using, and we can see that it's a Microsoft Excel comma separated values file. And we can see that it's coming under as all text files in our Window Explorer. If we were to click this drop down, right, and see here, what we're seeing is text, CSV, tab, and TSV. These are different types of text files that you can bring in. And since our file is a CSV, we can go ahead and bring this data source in. So let's go ahead and click that data source, and we'll just click open. And this file here is located wherever you saved it on your computer. So let's go ahead and open this up. Now Tableau has automatically brought us to this window here, and this is the data source pane. What we're looking at here is the table that we just brought in, right? The data source file that we just opened in the previous screen, and we are seeing it as a data source. So let's go ahead and navigate the screen a little bit and see what we're looking at here. Now this screen here is where we are going to actually bring in our tables and join them together. Now as we can see, Tableau has already done that for us. Since we opened the data source in the previous screen, we can see that this table here, New York room rental listings, right, this text file has already been brought in. So let's go ahead and drag this and take this out for a second. And the way you can do that is when you drag it, you see these X marks. Anywhere where there's an X mark right next to my mouse, anytime you see an X mark, that means the data source will be removed from that screen. So you could drag it anywhere outside of this box here, and we'll be able to remove that data source. So when we remove it, we could see that Tableau no longer has a table here in the connections window for our data source, and we are seeing a symbol here that says drag tables here. So what we're looking to do is to bring in our data table into this window. So what we can do is, since we already have the connection here from the previous window, we are seeing the table here for that. So we can go ahead and click that table, hold it, and drag it into our drag tables here screen. And when we do that, we now see the exact thing that we had before, which is our New York room rental listings table, and that is within our data source connections pane. And up here we can see the name of the actual data source. Now this is different from the name of the table, keep in mind. So when you have multiple data sources, you can actually name them accordingly, and you can change them by clicking this drop down. But in this case, we can see we only have our initial data source, which is the New York room rental listings, and we can go ahead and rename it to anything we would like to see. So in this case, this name is pretty good. We don't really need to get unique because it's our only data source. We're going to keep it simple for this example since we're just taking a look at it for the first time, and we'll just leave it like that. Now, heading on below, we can see that we have a data source window here that actually shows us our table structure. And what we're seeing here are three main things, okay? The very first thing up here, we are seeing the field type. So we're seeing this number here is actually a data integer type. It's a number type. It's a whole number. Over here, the ABC is a text field type. So as we can see, the listing URL is probably a website, so it's going to show up as an ABC. The ID, which is a unique number for this table, is going to show up as a number. And Tableau will automatically interpret this data for you in the best seam fit way possible for itself, so that you have to have minimal interaction with it in terms of cleaning the data. Or prepping the data as well. So in this case, this would fall under preparing and cleansing data. And as we can see that we have an ID, we have a numeric, we have a listing URL, which is ABC, we have a name, which is an ABC, and so forth. And when we drag here, we have a little drag window here, we can drag it to the right and we can see all the different fields that are coming in through our Tableau data source. Now we can see one that we haven't seen before, which is T and F. This is a true and false. So what we have here as a field, we can drag this over a little bit, and we can see the full name of the field. Host is a superhost. So this is a true and false field. It's either going to be true or it's going to be false, a yes or a no. Now later in this course, we're going to be doing some really cool stuff with this true and false in terms of how it shows up in our reports. A lot of times when you're preparing these reports, we're preparing them for very possibly non-technical folk. So they might not understand, a true and false relationship as easy as they would if it was a yes or no. So in this case, we can give it a text interpretation, and we could show this host as a superhost as a yes or no rather than a true or false. All right, so we'll take a look at that in a different session. I'm just pointing that out. It's going to be really, really cool. So furthermore, we have some ABC fields. We have some more whole number here. We have some more true and falses. And then we finally look at this. Now, this is really cool. These are what we call geotypes. All right, these are usually city, state, zip codes, all right, longitude, latitude, countries, things like that, geographical data that you can use to create map charts. And that's where these come into play. Now, we can see that a city, Tableau has already picked up that it's a city, state, and zip code, and we have country code, country, latitude, and longitude, and we are seeing that we have them as geocodes already. Now, this data is not specified as this type within our Excel CSV. That is completely left up to Tableau. And that's another reason why CSV files are so great, because they're so simplified that Tableau really has a great way of interpreting it, and it does a really great job when it works with CSVs. So I personally, when I'm not connecting to a server data source, I'll tend to lean towards a CSV just because of the way Tableau interprets it and has such a simple way of bringing it in. All right, so further along here, we can see some more numbers, we can see some more ABCs, true and falses, and things like that. And that's basically all of the different types of data types that we're bringing into this report. Now, what we can do is we can click this Update Now button, and what this does is it's going to populate here as a mini table. All right, and let's keep an eye on this rows thing here. It's going to populate a mini table, and it's going to show you the values within this table data source, and it's going to list them out for us, but it's only going to limit them by default to 1,000 rows. And this is mainly showing you that this is Tableau's way of saying that, hey, here's a sample set of data of what's coming in. Does it look good to you? Or the data type's correct? If not, this is where you want to make those changes. All right, and as we can see, the rows up here is going to be 1,000. It was blank before, and since we didn't specify it, it brought in 1,000 rows. But since you're analyzing your data and just making sure it's clean and looks right and it's the right data types, depending on the data, it can be pretty intensive. So maybe you want to see even less rows than that. You can even drop it down to 10 rows and hit enter, and we can see that now we only have 10 IDs, 1 through 10. And just remember, this does not mean that this is the only data that Tableau is bringing in. All this means is that this is the data that Tableau is using to show you a sample set of your data so that you can analyze it and cleanse it. All right. Now, another feature that we have within the data source pane is the metadata. So as we're seeing this table screen here, and this is the view we're looking at, right to the right of it, we could see something called the metadata manage tab. So once you click that, it's going to be the exact same view we had here, all right, but it's going to pretty much list out the different field names. So we're going to see the same thing we saw here. We're going to see ID, list URL, name, summary, space, all right, and we could see that this is the field name being brought into Tableau, as well as the data types being brought into Tableau for that field. We could see next to it the table that this field is coming in from, which all of which are from this New York room rental listings. The reason we have this table here is because when you're working with multiple data sources in Tableau, you will have another table here, and you will see that list show that table name as well as the fields with it. So it's great to have this table listing here so we can see that, hey, this field belongs to the New York room rental listings table, whereas another table might have neighborhood spelled differently, and that might be like Seattle's room rental listings, right, as another data source. So that's what we're looking at here. Now, the third field here is called the remote field name, and this is very similar to the field name here because it's almost identical, but as you'll see, listing underscore URL is interpreted as listing space URL by Tableau. So right here, over here on the left hand side, the field name column here is going to be all of the fields that are coming in from this data source, interpreted by Tableau and cleansed up to make them as clean as possible. So the remote field name are what they are in the CSV. So neighborhood overview with an underscore in the middle, medium underscore URL, picture underscore URL, host underscore ID. These are the way that these fields are written out within our CSV. Whereas in Tableau, they're cleansed up and more human friendly, and those spaces are put in place instead of those underscores, and we are now seeing camel case for our different fields. This camel case means that we have the first letter of every word capitalized. All right. So we can see some more examples here. We have neighborhood group cleansed, neighborhood group cleansed, city, state, zip code. Now, one of the main things that you want to keep in mind in this step of the Tableau data ingestion process is that you want to make sure that all fields that are coming in are unique. So Tableau has a really good way of telling you if you're screwing something up. So let's go ahead and see this here. Say we don't like the word name and we want to name it something else. Let's go ahead and name it description, for example. Let's go ahead and take this, call it description, and Tableau should yell at us. And it says here, a field name description already exists. So you can either copy this error message or go to Tableau support and get some help on it. But in this case, we see that it renamed it back to name, which is a unique title for this field. So that's basically what we're looking at. Now, the final feature that we have in this pane here is the data type. Now guys, if you have a field here, for example, you have an ID which is coming in as a numerical data type, that's automatically generated by Tableau. So if you wanted to take this ID field and you wanted to change it to a different type, just click on it and go down and you can create any different type of field. You could turn it into a decimal field. Right now it's a number whole. You could do a date and time, a date, and a string. So in this case, let's go ahead and click string. And we can now see that ID is being interpreted as a string, and it's now showing an ABC instead of that numerical symbol that we saw before. All right, so let's go ahead and make this back into a numerical field, and now we are now seeing our data. So let's go ahead and go back to our table structure here, and we can see that same set of symbols. You can also change the data types up here, as well as the metadata screen, or you can even rename them here just by right-clicking and renaming them. And it will show you the exact same issue if you were to name them something that already exists. So if we called it name, which is the same field right next to it, Tableau should yell at us and say a name field already exists. So we'll go ahead and call that listing URL. All right, so that's basically it, guys, for this data source screen. In the next session, we're going to be taking a look at our very first workbook screen, and that's sheet 1 right here. Look, Tableau is already asking us to go there. It's so excited to get us working. There are some other things in the screen that are a little bit more advanced. I'd like to cover some other topics before we get back to them, and some of those are things like hidden fields, aliases, as well as filtering. And these are more rather advanced concepts that I want to get into a little bit. We're going to bite off just as much as we can chew in these sessions. So just to make sure that we're not overwhelming you guys. So in the next session, guys, we're going to finally go into our worksheet here and finally take a look at what Tableau looks like when we're ready to start working with the data that we have. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for this session. And thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the comments section. If not, if there's something you want to review, I know there's a lot of information, go ahead and rewind this video and watch it multiple times so that you can get well acquainted with the screen, because it's really going to be your best friend in terms of getting your data ready for ingestion into Tableau. All right, guys, so I'll see you in the next session. Thanks a lot, and happy analyzing.